Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Hope you're doing well. So I was thinking about what Muslims contribute to society because it should be stated. And by identifying what Muslims contribute to society, we can help people to appreciate Muslims in society and to stop trying to harm us and call us all these mean, nasty names and whatever. Because we have to ask ourselves, what are they asking us to integrate into and to assemble into, right? So if you look at how Muslims contribute to sobriety, you could see that we should not assimilate into their intoxicant culture. Western values is a valuing of intoxicants, down from Hollywood to everything else. Americans love to get high. Americans love blaming Mexico for the drug problem and totally failing to realize how their lack of spiritual ethics and behaviors and mannerisms and love of indulging in the passions and hedonism breeds into broken homes, which fuel a traumatized mind that seeks out coping mechanisms through drugs. Okay? And we Muslims, we don't contribute to drunk driving if we're following the Sharia. So when I'm giving you an example, it means a Muslim who's actually following the rules concerning intoxicants. We're not smoking fentanyl and pissing in the street. We are not smoking crack and breaking into cars. We are not smoking blunts in the street and then mumbling stuff at people who walk by. We are entirely sober. Okay? And please don't tell me chocolate is a drug and coffee is a drug. Okay? Because nobody is prostituting themselves for a cup of coffee or a chocolate bar. Okay? To compare meth to coffee is retarded. Okay? Now, the benefits of a sober society means people's reasoning is less impaired. It means people are less likely to act on emotion and they face their pain and get through it better. People who use drugs at a very young age, they start to halt their development, their mental development. They're stuck in the past. They bring up the past constantly and they can't get over their past. So when they haven't faced that trauma, it comes back up again, and then they seek to escape their own thoughts through intoxicants. And then they go back and forth. Regardless of how people will say, oh, psilocybin mushrooms and DMT, like Joe Rogan is constantly pushing drugs. Oh, this will help people get over their PTSD from war or from, some type of trauma. Then you're making yourself dependent upon psychedelic mushrooms, and you cannot hold down a productive job if you're getting high all the time. And when you're spending money on spacing out instead of being in the here and now, you're going to get too used to being in that imaginary world, that illusion, the illusory realm. Okay? It's an illusion. It's beyond smoke and mirrors. It's just the catacomb of your own mind, a sort of vortex spiral of delusions and delirium that you habitate for a specific fixed time and then come out of when you withdraw and you're having, you've come back to reality and you've sobered up. So liberals have given us the most amount of drug addicts ever that humanity has really known, I'd argue. Because liberals say legalize, tax, and regulate all drugs, and they're constantly introducing wine, beer festivals. They have to have a Bloody Mary on brunch just to eat their eggs Benedict. You hear wine moms, they can't even take care of their kids without wanting to chug a bottle of wine. And then as the more they drink, the more bitchy and cunty they become with their husbands. As men drink, and then they leave their bitchy wife at home, and he's looking at some woman in the bar, hooks up with her in the bathroom, catches gonorrhea, brings it home to his wife, and the cycle continues. Intoxicants destroy families on every level, and how many people they cheated and they wish, oh man, if I just wouldn't have got drunk and I would have stayed away from the secretary. Or a girl will say, if I just wouldn't have smoked that blunt and did that coke, I wouldn't have let this guy do stuff to me. I wish I would have never done it. How many women when they're at a party and the energy is just swarming. They get overwhelmed with the energy, and then they make grievous mistakes because the intoxicants kind of urge you down that path, right? And you can't control the intoxicant. The intoxicant controls you because it literally changes your consciousness. It drags you down. It can make you nauseous. It can make your body destabilize. Some people drink so much they get alcohol poisoning, okay? How do I get rid of a hangover? The alcohol has such control over you that it'll make you forget your inhibitions, and it can make you have this social lubricant that becomes a slippery slide into mistakes and despair. And just like you can't control yourself when you slip on the ice, you put too much of that social lubricant into your body, you're going to be slipping and sliding and cracking ankles. It's just not a safe way to live. So, with having Sharia type Muslims in your society, you are gonna not have that problem of drug addiction. Women who use drugs while pregnant are a burden on humanity, and they birth unhealthy children. People who use drugs and intoxicants, they are a burden on the medical industry. Okay? And they raise traumatized children. Junkies who are parents are never good parents. Alcoholic dads beating on their women, alcoholic mothers throwing things, having tantrums, you name it. The amount of children who are traumatized by a drug addicted parent is very, very high. So when you look at the secular liberal atheist and how you go into the grocery store, it's aisles and aisles and aisles of alcohol. Things that if you were to drink that entire bottle, you're gonna probably do something you'll regret. You know? How many people use intoxicants and then they get really strange ideas and they act on those intrusive thoughts? Whereas when you're sober, you're more rational and discerning and able to control situations around you better with a higher level of focus and acuity. Okay? The person who can get through depression sober versus the one who is just guzzling down that vodka every day, every week, every Saturday, who's going to be the more productive citizen? Because drug addicts are a liability. Drug addicts, they are like fleas. They will do everything in their power to get money for their drugs. Sell their bodies, sell their children. I remember a crime story where there was a 6-year-old daughter and the drug addict mom didn't have money to pay the drug dealer, owed her $200. She said, "You can R-word my daughter to pay off that bill." She led him. There was a camera in the hallway, and he had picked up this girl, and he took her, and then he murdered her. And she told the police, "Well, he was just supposed to R-word her. He wasn't supposed to murder her." So they put the mom in jail and obviously put the guy in jail. But the way that little girl is just staring up at him, having no idea this is the last time she's going to be breathing, is creepy. And she did that because of drugs. She didn't have money and she wanted to indulge. If she would have stayed sober and never developed that drug addiction, that child would still be alive. That man would be in prison because he wouldn't be allowed under Sharia law to be selling these substances. Now, a liberal will say legalize, tax, and regulate it, that drug dealer can have a formal business and that therefore it's okay. No. No matter how you try to control the potency, it's still going to be a problem. If you look at the safe injection sites that these liberals have created, and I've shared some in the past, but it's spooky. Someone's just like, another person's just spread out, another person's just hungover, and you're like, is this life? Should we be doing this to people? And it's just not conducive to a healthy society. And then you look at sperm counts being lowered, child abuse rates, infidelity. How much of that is because of intoxicants? So Muslims, when they obey the Sharia and take no intoxicants, you're not going to have that burden on the medical system. You're not going to have the danger and threat that drug addicts pose to society. See, whether it's legal or illegal, it's going to be a problem. Okay, so even if they said meth is legal tomorrow, liberals would say, oh, now that it's legal, everything's going to be a-okay. People are going to stop using it. No one's going to want to use it. No, the addictive substance can't be regulated out of it. And they will find a way. The drug addict is very clever. They'll always find a way to alter it, switch it up, and make it more potent. You're not going to escape these minds because they want to get high. And so, if you look at what the cartels have done to countries with the drugs that they've manufactured and who they've hurt along the way, you're like, this is not healthy for those who sell it and those who consume it, right? And then if you think about, for example, how much water is given to the beer, the alcohol companies. Think about that as well. So we're in a drought. Water is a very precious commodity. So instead of, building pipelines and finding ways to store water and getting glacial water and making snow water purified and desalinating water, we have lots of ways we could fix some of these water problems. No, we won't do that. Instead, we're going to keep people with polluted water, and we're going to give the clean water over to the alcohol companies. I find that to be quite strange. So in a Muslim society, you would save water because it wouldn't be wasted on the alcohol companies, right? It would be put towards actually giving communities water wells, giving communities access to running water, and giving people access to water so they can have it for their cattle, and you name it, for everything else, their gardens, productive things, instead of giving it to, Jack Daniels or Corona or all these different companies, right? See, the Christian in the UK, with these UK riots, they look at the Muslims and say, assimilate. Why should Muslims start becoming drunkards? Why should that be? So that you can have easier access to women, increase their body count, increase the abortion rate, increase the STD rates. I just read a story today that talks about gonorrhea is becoming resistant to antibiotics. So if we know that bars cause people to hook up, and that in order for people to want to participate in orgies and all these other debaucherous activities, if we cut off their supply to alcohol, people would have to do this sober, and if they were sober, maybe they would think that what they're doing is shameful. Alcohol removes your shame. So shame is a good social control. Liberal says, have no shame, let it all hang out, honey. You want to mate with the horse, you want to, sell crack, you want to walk half nude in the street, do it all, baby. Doesn't matter. Freedom, liberty, blah, blah, blah. Islam doesn't say that. And when you are sober, you have a different energy to you, a different type of focus. When you're talking to someone, they take you to eat. I used to see this a lot as a server in fine dining. You see people do business meeting and they start drinking. And then you see how, who's going to start wavering in their manners first. Because some of them stay a while and they order a cocktail and that alcohol hits you. And so, who can hold their liquor well and keep their wits about them? It's almost like a puzzle these two businessmen do with each other. Right? I always found that odd. So, you're about to trust this person, but you want to see how they act under the influence so that you can gauge if they're a safe bet or not to invest in. When in the past, if someone was a habitual drinker, you'd be like, I don't really know if I'm going to depend on this person. Now, there are some people who work in construction and they have beers with some sandwiches. I don't agree with that. Drink some water, but there's a problem deeply. But then some of them will be overweight, they're not taking care of their health, and you're just like, A woman who drinks is not safe around a newborn. If your husband's an alcoholic, it's not safe to take care of the toddlers. Because if you're too drunk to go to the hospital in emergency to visit someone who's sick, You're too drunk to, your child's choking on something, you can't drive them because you're drunk, you can't even communicate with the 911 dispatchers. You are a failure. If you are a drug addict, you are a failure. You're not a failure in one aspect until you get sober. Like when you are sober, you've achieved something of great success and you've contributed order to the society. Now, there's other things that make a society full of disorder, but intoxicants ruin societies, and America has proven that. Truly, it has. Alcohol is a curse. Regardless of how many people try to make fake articles about, oh, it'll help you with this, it'll help you with that. No, 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 no. The amount of damage it's caused to people's health, lives, spirituality, and how many bad memories and regrets it's poured into this realm is extensive. And it's disgusting how much a liberal needs alcohol in order to function. If you look at Joe Rogan, he's barely sober, constantly high, okay, constantly rambling, and then he's drinking on top of it, taking DMT, taking mushrooms, and then taking a bunch of steroid and stem cell injections, and it's very odd behavior. It's like, okay, you're drinking kombucha, but you keep smoking cigars and chugging whiskey. That's kind of a weird diet plan, don't you think? And he encourages young men to drink, which alcohol harms your fertility, harms the quality of your swimmers. And some women, they can't stop drinking. And then you'll see women who will be like, how to keep drinking while breastfeeding. They can't even stop while breastfeeding. They're so selfish, so addicted to alcohol that they can't even give it up so that their baby can have the best breast milk. Instead, they say, oh, if you just pump it 2 hours after and then throw away the milk, then it'll be okay. And you're like, wow. Alcohol will make your baby drowsy and not want to feed. You'd rather risk that so that you can get a temporary buzz because you haven't found a better way to cope with life or just deal with it. And so alcohol makes worse mothers, unhealthy babies, and how many women are all up in their homes drinking while their husband's at work? The man might think, oh, it's going to make my woman want to warm up to me like a very satiated cat. She's going to purr at me. I'm going to get lucky tonight. When in reality, she's just brewing, swirling around the wine, sniffing it. Oh, he did this, he did that, and the bad memories flood in. Because when you're under intoxicants, they just flood in. And she's like, why don't you do this, and why don't you do that, and I remember when you said this, and why didn't you text back, and then this comes a problem. I've had a lot of people in my family die of alcoholism, and both my parents drank alcohol and used drugs, and I would witness my father fighting with my stepmoms who are alcoholics, and it's not pretty. It's not a good thing. And my siblings' mom, who was my stepmom, but their biological mom, she overdosed. She used to drink, but she'd take pills, and she died in her bed. And that's a sad thing that they're denied a mom because she couldn't stay sober. And liberals, they constantly ignore the dangers of alcoholism. They glorify it. They make it seem smooth and classy. The magicians in the marketing sphere make it seem like if you don't drink, you're weird. People shame you, like, oh, you want a beer? You're like, no, I'm good. They're like, what's wrong with you? And it's like, no, it should be what's wrong with you. And so, having healthy, formidable, sober men helps them to resist harlots, helps them to resist the clutches of witches. See, Islam doesn't allow free mixing either. So, look how many social ills are removed. Men aren't sitting there getting drunk hoping to hook up with all these women. That doesn't benefit women. See, a woman gets passed around a bunch of men with all her free mixing while she's high. She gets totally drunk at a frat party. All the boys run a train on her. And then her reputation's ruined, and then she can't get a good guy, and the guy's reputation's intact, unfortunately, and then he can go on and get a good girl who didn't even know or that he was like that in the past. And so, if you look at how if a Muslim man stays sober, doesn't free mix, the chances of him committing adultery are less, and he's allowed to have a second, third, or fourth wife, and then those women don't have to pimp themselves on OnlyFans. So you can see how the vigor and the strength and focus and drive of a sober Muslim healthy man who's secure in his masculinity and who fears Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a great force to be reckoned with. Whereas the indulgent Christian who's drinking beer, watching the NFL, has a beer gut, and goes to church every once in a while, just on Easter or Christmas, or when his wife nags him to death, and he goes, then you're like, he's weaker. He's weaker. He's more indulgent. Beer bellies, beer ruins your workout. Alcohol makes you want to not study something. So if you're sober and you're like, I'm going to get some entertainment through reading, I'm going to go fix a truck. But if you're drunk trying to fix a truck, you're going to make a mistake and get hurt. There's such a slippery way. People think they can control the intoxicants, but the point of the intoxicant is to lose control. That's the paradox. They'll tell you, well, if I know the right amount, and I know how much I can handle. But your mood will fluctuate with the intoxicant, and now you're on the roller coaster. You're whipped. You're under the boot. And it only does things to make you suffer. You will say things you don't mean. You will bring on a lot more trauma. And that's not wise. And so Muslims contribute sobriety to civilizations, which makes them flourish more. Now the marketing will have you think the opposite. They'll be like, no, the only way you can succeed in business is if you have some type of expensive cocktail. Oh, the only time you should be seen as wealthy or anyone of status is if you have a $300 bottle of wine and a decanter. Alcohol is a very sneaky thing. Oh, the only way you can show you're sophisticated is if you take a picture of your food with a martini in there. It's like, And how many men, over time, they start wife swapping, doing swinger culture with the intoxicants mixed in? Just really take a step back and ask yourself, why should Muslims degrade themselves by becoming part of the West's alcoholistic culture, intoxicant culture? Why is that? Assimilating into that nonsense is what's destroyed the West. Very peculiar. So, if you allow Muslims into your country who obey the Sharia, you'll get more sobriety. And for those Muslims who are failing to be sober, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala correct you. May you rectify your affairs, and may you get sober and stop making poor decisions. And may sisters never date drug dealers and avoid people who use drugs. You gotta fix yourself. You gotta separate yourself from that if you want to be able to have success. Because when you confront pain head on and you conquer it, you'll be stronger and wiser. Something to think about. So the next time you hear one of the Tommy Robinson types, one of these UK Christians, and they say that Muslims are doing this, help them to recognize that Muslims bring sobriety. Now, if you want to go deep into the rabbit hole of thought, the breads and circuses that Karl Marx mentioned, and how you can placate the people through intoxicants so that they never rise up or have a rebellion, so that they never want anything better than what they have, because you can cope them in mediocrity easier through substances. You can lock a person in a cage, give them some meth, they'll never realize they were in a cage. You can induce a delusion on them to where they'll never want more than that. And so you can see why corrupt politicians, corrupt governments, immoral societies push intoxicants on their people, because they hate them. They don't want to provide them with anything. They just want them to be these tax cattle and then just piss off and die. But if you actually wanted to have a strong society, you would see the best thing for you is to have sober individuals. It's a very potent thought. And that's why Islam is better than secular liberal atheism. Just one of the many reasons why Islam is better. Let me know what you think, and if you'd like to support my work and see more about what I write, you can do so by going to www.subscribestar.com/MilahanArchive. Hope to see you there.